Let's start with the latest revelation that 4 more cabinet ministers are not seeking re-election. Carla Qualtrough, Marie-Claude Bibeau, Dan Vandel, and Philomena Tassi have all told the Prime Minister they are not running when the next federal election comes around. This comes as a group of Liberal MPs are trying to push Trudeau out of the leadership.
Holy moly, things are going from bad to worse for Justin Trudeau. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the breaking news that happened in regards to 4 Liberal cabinet ministers who announced that they will not be rerunning for the next election, which now brings the total up to, I believe, 6 that will not be rerunning. As we had Seamus O'Regan earlier this year say he was out, and just last month we had Pablo Rodriguez say he wasn't going to rerun, and now we have these 4 announcements. Plus all of the caucus members that are writing letters, the 20 to 30 some odd, saying that they're unhappy with Trudeau. Things are just not looking good for him. And as good of an opening as we had with David Cochrane there, we're actually not going to be watching his video. We're going to be checking in with Vassie and her panel. And we're starting off with Brian Gallant, who is the former New Brunswick Liberal Premier. And this is what he had to say.
Outgoing Minister Philomena Tassi just moments ago here on the show detailing her decision not to seek re-election. She's one of 4 ministers to drop the news this morning, just days ahead of an organized caucus challenge of the Prime Minister's leadership of the Liberal Party. Today's 4 takes the tally of ministers to recently bow out of the next election up to 6. How much of a hit is this? Brian, I'll start with you. Do you think there's any way the Prime Minister can spin this as not a hit, another hit to his leadership, or is this, in your view, a hit to his leadership?
It's definitely a hit in the sense that it's repeating a story that's incredibly not helpful for the Liberals at this moment. It's also sort of aggravating it. There's no question about that as well. It seems like so far the ministers have certainly toed the line and said that they're still supportive of the Prime Minister, even if they are resigning. So that's helpful. But look at us right now and look at the next few days. People are going to talk about the potential of the caucus meeting going awry next week. Now, the interesting part, one little opportunity perhaps for Trudeau and his team is to actually delay a cabinet shuffle for a while. It may be a way in which you have a calmer caucus meeting on Wednesday, because maybe there's some that, maybe all, or maybe at least a handful, and maybe the more important ones are thinking to themselves, well, I'm not going to go to the mic. I'm not going to be as aggressive as I was planning, because you never know. Maybe I am about to be named to cabinet. So in a way, it could be some little bit of a blessing in disguise. Now, that said, I want to be very clear. The minute that they do the shuffle, everybody that maybe was a little calmer because of that possibility, and they see they're not asked to be in cabinet, well, that dissipates, and they're probably just as upset, maybe even more upset.
Now, in my opinion, Brian Gallant typically has pretty bad takes. However, I got to agree with him on this one. It might be beneficial for Justin to postpone on the cabinet shuffle. And what Brian was actually saying is, once a cabinet minister leaves or can't be in their role anymore, then Justin has to pick a new one by going to the MPs and some of the backbenchers and then seeing if they would be interested in taking that role. As we saw with Seamus O'Regan leaving, they moved Stephen McKinnon. And with Pablo Rodriguez, we just saw Anita Anand get shuffled into his old position. But now there's going to be 4 new spots. And if Trudeau decides to also do this cabinet shuffle with the caucus meeting, and he doesn't pick, say, some of these individuals who are a little ticked off with him, then things might get a little bit worse. But as we now move to Marika Walsh, she kind of puts forward that even this cabinet position might not even be worth it, because where's the real benefits to it?
Marika, you're having a lot of conversations, as I am, with people who are hoping to convey that message to the Prime Minister. Is it your impression that at this point the possibility of getting into cabinet will dissuade them? My impression is that it would not, only because they feel like they're going to lose their seats.
Yeah, I think certainly I heard from some Liberals today saying, oh, we're being managed. Like, this is coming out just before this caucus meeting to dangle this carrot. I'm not sure if it was a sanctioned leak. Louis Blouin is a very good reporter who had it first. So who knows?
It's definitely coordinated.
Way,
they did it all at once, though.
Exactly.
Minister Tassi essentially said that very blatantly.
Yeah,
she got a call last night. It's okay to release your statement today. Yeah.
Yeah, either way, it ended up being coordinated, and there is that very short-term payoff that Brian talks about. But as we saw with the shuffle last summer, there's a lot of anger that came from the people who weren't. So I'm not sure it will be the long-term payoff the Prime Minister's hoping for. I think this is just another thing to manage and figure out. And it's the third shuffle in 4 months. So there's not a sense of sort of an overarching strategy or coordination within the PMO of dealing with everything at once and then moving on.
Now, 3 cabinet shuffles in the past 4 months is pretty bad. But another thing that is going to probably hinder Trudeau is with his big promise of gender equality and representation, him losing Carla Quatro, who's his BC representative, means that he won't have a female member from the reports that I heard west of Ontario. So he's not going to be able to probably do the full 50-50 representation, which is so important to him and his Liberal views. But as we move forward to the Conservative member on the panel, he actually kind of throws a jab at these ministers, these cabinet ministers, and says, like, they're kind of not really that memorable anyway.
Yeah. Corey, your thoughts on kind of what it looks like, I guess, from the outside, that you've got all this reporting about the possibility of caucus pushing you out. Sean Casey going on the record this week, a sitting MP planning to run in the next election, saying you should leave. And now 4 ministers saying, okay, of course they're going to say for their own reasons, most of them, but that they are just choosing not to seek re-election either. Like, what is the bigger picture?
I think the bigger picture is that people are quietly walking away. And there seems to be a small but growing number of MPs that are willing to confront the Prime Minister directly on his leadership. But I think there's a much larger group of people who will just quietly fade into the background here. And I think that's sort of what you're seeing. Now, I don't think these particular ministers leaving have a huge amount of national importance. People would have to know who they are to care that they're leaving. And I don't think very many Canadians, even folks like myself who follow politics pretty closely, have anything but passing familiarity of who the 4 who left today are. But some of the others who have left, particularly Rodriguez and Seamus O'Regan, are big names and potential leaders and past leaders of importance within the Liberal Party as a whole. So. Look, I think it's bad news. I think you can expect to see more bad news like this. I was chuckling at Brian's point because I think he's bang on. Nothing brings caucus in alignment like the potential of a shuffle. Everyone gets on their best behavior. But I think he's also right that as soon as, and Marika as well, that as soon as that is gone, anyone who wasn't selected becomes even more grumpy than they were before. I've never seen a caucus member who isn't in cabinet who doesn't think that the government as a whole would be doing so much better if only they were named to cabinet. It's a universal.
Now, to Corey's point, if I did throw up this photo of the 4 cabinet ministers that said that they were leaving, you probably wouldn't be able to tell me any of their names or who they are unless you watched maybe Question Period or have seen some sort of interaction with them before. But that being said, when she moves on to Tom Mulcair, who I actually wanted to play a clip from him earlier in the day when it was just a one-on-one, but he kind of repeated the same things here. He mentions that all of this is kind of a distraction, especially what Trudeau's been doing with the foreign inquiry. He's literally just trying to take the heat off him, put it on all Pierre, saying, look at him not getting the briefing. He doesn't want to know about the conservatives that might be tied in with foreign interference, which is all a bunch of smoke and mirrors in my opinion. But just like in yesterday's video, he kind of doubles down and says that prorogation is most likely what Trudeau's going to be doing.
Tom, your thoughts on sort of the bigger picture here, the impression that this leaves. I take Corey's point about not everyone knowing, or being super familiar with who these individuals are, but they had been around for a long time. And it comes it's the timing of it, I think, that certainly maybe amplifies the impact.
Yeah, and to Marika's point, I couldn't agree more. This is clearly orchestrated, and it's orchestrated to put a little bit more chaff into the air to try to distract the radar. And since the weekend, I'm not saying that what happened between Canada and India didn't have to happen or that India didn't do anything wrong. But of course, the timing of that announcement on the Monday of a long weekend was clearly intended to distract. The outburst yesterday about Poilievre and why doesn't he come and look at the secret documents. I want to be able to warn and arm the Conservatives. That's called going over the top. And now this. So you do have a coordinated effort to take out the bad news. But as everyone has just said very correctly, I've been a party leader. I can talk to that. Yes, of course. If you say that there's going to be some important assignments going out and you've got some people leaving, you're going to try to get people on their best behavior. I don't think it's going to change a thing. I think that there are 20 or 25 people who had the guts to sign a piece of paper. They'll be going to the microphones, to use the term, which is the correct one, in a caucus. And the other thing, of course, that we're seeing is that somebody of the caliber of Sean Casey, who for reasons that have never been totally clear, was left out of caucus. Has left out of cabinet. He's still in caucus. But, this guy went to the microphones himself this week publicly, called for his leader to step down. And by the way, did it in perfect French. People tended not to know that this MP from Prince Edward Island speaks absolutely fluent French and was on French and English TV saying, look, his time's up. So I think that all of that is a critical mass of information that Trudeau and the people around him should be processing in the right way. Are they oblivious to it? I'm not convinced they're oblivious to it. I think that they know that the writing's on the wall, but Trudeau has a couple of options. The main one, of course, is prorogation. A lot of people have talked about that. The other one, I know it sounds over the top, but it's worth mentioning that he has the absolute right constitutionally to walk across the lawn from Rideau Cottage, where he is, to Rideau Hall, where Mary Simon is, and ask for an election writ. I don't think he'd do that. That would be suicidal right now, and there's nothing in place. But it's his nuclear option, to put it that way.
Yeah, and Tom is spot on. If we just step back and take a snapshot, the past 4 months, there's been 3 cabinet shuffles, plenty of scandals tied to the Liberals. The STTC documents still haven't been produced to give to the RCMP, so Parliament is still paralyzed, as they claimed. Nothing's being moved or happening there. We just had this latest announcement of the foreign interference with India, followed by the public inquiry of foreign interference, where Trudeau tried to steer it towards the Conservatives and get some heat off of him. We have his caucus revolting against him, cabinet members leaving. Things are not looking good for him. And by the sounds of it, prorogation might be the small little life vest that can help him until he decides on his own to leave. But even that, I don't think is going to happen, because he made the statement on Monday that he's going to be running for the party. And I don't know if it's something with these Liberals and their brain rot, but now you're going to hear the bad take, as I mentioned, from Brian Gallant, as he somehow just claims, well, if it's 20 or so people that are revolting against him, it's a little bit more manageable. But if it's like 30 or 40, then it might be a problem. And you can just see Marika Walsh and Vashi Kapelos's face when he says that. They're just kind of like, what? What are you talking about? 20 is a lot.
Brian, the term that Tom used, critical mass, do you think there is critical mass at this point on the question of his leadership?
Well, it depends how you kind of frame that, in the sense, is there critical mass of those that will put their name to a letter or to the cause? I'm not sure. I think if there's 20, that's probably potentially manageable. If it's getting up to 30, 40, it's starting to get a little more complicated.
And that's what I mean about this guy and his terrible takes. 30 to 40 is when it becomes complicated. No. 20 is complicated. Maybe 2 to 3 would be under the manageable category that you wanted to label 20 as, but 20 is a big deal. And Marika Walsh agrees with that, Corey, as well as Tom Mulcair. And even Vashi confirms that 20 is like a third of the backbench for the Liberal Party's caucus.
Marika, I know you talk to people all the time who are, involved in discussions around the Prime Minister's future. What is your sense about their sense of what critical mass would be?
I think that's the $1 million question, and I don't think there is agreement from Liberals in the backbench. They think 20 is a big number, and I think that is too. If that comes public, that is a sizable chunk of your backbench when you factor out parliamentary secretaries, cabinet ministers who are just not going to be the ones. It's a third of your backbench. When you factor in all the people not running already, it's even more, right? So who is behind Trudeau when he's at the next general election, if they are saying this? From our reporting, some people close to the Prime Minister think that it will only be a handful that comes forward and that will be manageable. They were very skeptical about our number that we reported, that it would be 20 MPs as a minimum. coming forward. Of course, this is all based on what we know now. There's a lot of uncertainty in this, a lot of sort of dissent or discussion still among the people who are coordinating or trying to be part of this revolt as to how they go forward. But another person close to the Prime Minister said they really actually don't know what to expect in terms of the numbers. The Prime Minister, despite what he said publicly on Monday, that he's just making calls about India, he has been making calls one-on-one to MPs to test the waters and see where things are at. But the strategy right now from the Prime Minister's office does seem to be about day by day and getting through the day and not sort of, the bigger picture.
And that has to be the million-dollar question. Who still, at this point, would be supporting Trudeau? Who believes in him in terms of Liberals, in terms of his caucus, in terms of all those people there? I'm sure all of them would benefit from him being out of the way, as we heard from the reports of some of these caucus members who are upset with him or saying that they need a change. They've been claiming that a lot of their constituents say, we want to vote for you, but with Trudeau still there, we're probably not going to vote for you or the Liberals. Now, do I think that's enough for them to swing and somehow surpass the Conservatives? No, definitely not. But anything would help them at this point. And Trudeau's living some sort of a pipe dream, thinking that he has any chance of winning. As Corey explains it here, it's essentially 0% chance.
Do you think the Prime Minister's time at the helm of the Liberal Party, Corey, is limited?
I think it's limited, and it's going to come to an end. It's just a matter of how. Certainly, if he goes into an election campaign, it's going to be over. There's, I think, as close to a 0% chance of him being reelected as you can come to in this business. So it's going to come to an end. It's just how, whether it's on his own terms by recognizing what is obvious to anyone who can read a poll, that Canadians are done with him. And I think, the question for members of caucus that they're looking at, and just to put it bluntly, caucus are usually a bunch of chocolate soldiers. They melt as soon as you turn up the heat. And the fact that they even have 20 of them talking about doing this is a big number. And, it only took a dozen to end the political career of Stockwell Day. It took 25 to end Margaret Thatcher's career. So I think it's a substantial number, but they're looking at their own survival right now. And the reality is, I think for those in Atlantic Canada, probably none of them are coming back, like zero. So, it's more of an existential question for them. They know he's gone one way or another, and they're starting to think about whether or not they want to be gone too. And I think the Liberal Party writ large has to start thinking about whether, what this means for the party, for the institution of the Liberal Party, if they allow such an unpopular leader and Prime Minister lead them into the next election campaign.
Well, I would say a good outcome was probably that the Liberal Party might cease to exist. This guy has plummeted them to depths that they've never been before, and he just doesn't stop. He's such a narcissist that he just wants to keep going. He wants that 10 years. I don't know. He just has something to prove, and nobody's asking him to prove it. Everybody's saying, dude, you've done your time. Get out. We don't want you anymore. We don't need you anymore. You're actually hurting us more than you're helping us. And this is something that Tom kind of insinuates when he's talking about Anthony Housefather, who actually came on to Vash's show yesterday. And he didn't really say that he had confidence in Trudeau. He just stated that he had confidence in whoever their leader was. And this is something that Tom picked up on because Anthony is kind of like a diehard Liberal. He really is there for the whole team. But with the way that he's talking now, it seems like even he would be down for a change of leadership.
Last word to you, Tom.
Actually, I'll go back to an interview you had with Anthony Housefather, a Montreal area MP, on Tuesday. And I was gobsmacked. I was waiting to come on to a panel after that, and I got to see the whole thing as it rolled out. And I was amazed because Housefather is that quintessential, loyal, partisan Liberal. All his values, his whole career. He's that guy. And he refused to say whether or not he supported Trudeau. He said, well, I'll always support the person who's leader, but then again, we have to have a discussion about who the leader should be in the next campaign. So when you get stuff like that from a person like Anthony Housefather, there is definitely something difficult that's going to be there for Mr. Trudeau when he comes to caucus next week. And I think I agree with Marika. If it's anywhere near 20, that's a huge number, and that's very hard to manage. You can't talk your way beyond 20 people who are saying, boss, it's really time for you to leave.
And this is what you get from stupidity and confidence rolled all up into one. Justin thinks he's the only one who can do this. He thinks he's the only one that can beat Pierre Poilievre, which clearly from the polls over the past year has not been the case. He's been down 20 some odd points. Every policy they put forward doesn't change that fact. His whole generational fairness has blown up in his face. A lot of young voters are going to be voting conservative this year. His caucus members have openly expressed their constituents saying they won't vote Liberal if he is still the party leader, or they're not going to vote Liberal because he is the party leader. Not only that, you now have the caucus members coming out and revolting against you. Cabinet ministers leaving and not rerunning for the next election because they see the writing on the wall. This guy is literally Icarus flying into the sun, and he's not going to be able to stop until he burns and falls to the ground, when all he needs to do is get his head out of the clouds and just realize what's ahead of him. Either step down, let an early election get called, whatever the case may be, just get out of here, buddy, because nobody wants you and you're not going to win. But as always, that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you guys. Let me know what you thought about all this in the comment section below. If you could, drop a subscription. I would really do appreciate those. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.